This podcast is brought to you by the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. We know that we have seen a significant impact lately because of what has happened with Twitter and the purchase by Elon Musk, that deal being completed on Friday. So what lies ahead for Twitter from a business perspective when you think about the structure of the company and where it is all headed? Pleasure to be joined by Nina Trentman, who is bureau chief at the CFO Journal for the Wall Street Journal, and she joins us to talk a little bit about this right now. Nina, a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks very much for your time.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and obviously we're in a time where we're going to see a lot of change with Twitter, CFOs being probably one of the jobs that is obviously going to be very important to that process. But when you think about Twitter and its finances and how it's going to be running as a company, I think this is it safe to say it's a time of adjustment for Twitter?
Oh, yeah, that's probably fair. Not just from a finance perspective, of course, but also from a management and operations perspective. But yeah, we've seen that Ned Siegel, who's been the finance chief since 2017, I think, for the past 5 years, he departed on Thursday. So the company currently doesn't have a CFO. We'll see if Elon Musk, who is now basically the company's sole director, if he appoints a new person in charge of finance. But independent of who that's going to be, that person will certainly have to do a lot of work, given that the company's taking on a lot of debt. Costs have gone up in recent months. We've heard reports over the weekend that Elon Musk is considering to cut jobs quite significantly. So there's a lot of work to be done. Also because the company is its shares are pleasing to trade in the markets next week. So it's switching from being a publicly traded entity to a private company, which also means changes in terms of what's due to the outside world. Plus, it also changes how the company can fund itself going forward. So, yeah, I would say it's a long list of things that are awaiting a new CFO.
And as you kind of alluded to, the amount of debt that was incurred in this deal is something that, you know, that's a significant hurdle for any CFO to think about when they're planning out where this company, where this platform is going to be going in the next several years.
Yeah, that's true. The company will be settled with, I think, about $13 billion in debt as a result of the take-private transaction, which also comes then with new costs from payments that Twitter will have to make on those loans. Analysts have put this estimate to about $1 billion of annual interest payments that Twitter will have to make, which the company also will have to fund with cash that it generates from operations. The leverage ratio will go up quite significantly. That's basically the ratio of things before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization to new debt or net debt, and that's going to go up to about 6 to 8 times based on estimates from analysts, which is up from about 1 time. So that illustrates the huge debt burden that the company will face. Just to give a bit of a comparison, the average for companies in the S&P 500, so for America's largest publicly traded companies, was 2.7 in the most recent period. So that gives you a sense that Twitter, from that vantage point, will be levered much more highly, even though, of course, it doesn't, going forward, face the scrutiny that publicly traded companies face with regards to their debt, part of this transaction with Elon Musk.
But as they're trying to build out their financial position, there is obviously the conversation that Musk has had about what the Twitter platform will be in the future and kind of this all-encompassing app that he views Twitter being maybe down the road, and all of the different pieces that might be in that. And I think that's obviously part of what we will see play out at some point here. And maybe it's more important sooner rather than later to get this rolling so that they can tackle some of these financial issues sooner than later.
Yeah, I assume that that's what's going on behind the scenes. But and you mentioned the so-called everything app that Mr. Musk has been talking about, which to some degree would require new investment because Twitter currently doesn't have all the features such an app would have. I think the fundamental question is very much: does Elon Musk want to run Twitter for growth or for profitability, because that would mean from a finance perspective very different things. Growth would of course mean more spending, more investment, potentially less focus on bringing costs down, whereas profitability would bring a much clearer focus on reducing costs and also potentially coming up with new income streams, new ways to generate income. We've seen Mr. Musk over the weekend and recent days talking about potentially charging users for the blue tick that verified users on Twitter have. We saw numbers of around $20 per month, similar to a subscription type model. So we will have to see going forward what will be executed in terms of new revenue streams that Twitter is tapping into at a time, of course, when the overall advertising market is slowing because of the slowdown in the economy, which will have a significant impact on the revenue that Twitter generates just with ads.
So that relationship, I guess, with whoever is going to be that next CFO and Elon Musk is going to be an interesting one. And I think that's where whoever the hire is going to be interesting to see in terms of what that path on some of these issues is going to be. You mentioned about the potential job cuts, whether or not there are more cost-cutting measures that Musk wants to have around Twitter, all of those components about the blue check mark and the also the subscription platform that they have and what that financial outlook is going to be like for Twitter over the next 5 years. That's going to be right front and center in the lap of the CFO.
Yeah, that's true. I think it will be important, of course, for a new finance director or finance chief to be closely aligned with what Mr. Musk has in mind for Twitter. So to some degree, what awaits this person is not just the company and its finances and its obligations and the interest payments, but also just navigating Mr. Musk as the sole director at the moment of the company and basically the owner of the company, which brings its own challenges if we look at the most recent interactions between Twitter and communications between Mr. Musk and the company. So this effort to basically call off the deal and all the back and forth that we've seen, which I think indicates that, I think the new CFO certainly has to brace himself for a little bit, him or herself, for a little bit of Musk-type behavior, which we have seen play out in the public markets recently. But now, of course, that will probably be more behind the scenes, given that Twitter is no longer then a publicly traded business.
Well, I wondered, because obviously the other side to Elon Musk is not only what he tweets out and his thought process about the company and his concern about bots and everything else, but is the fact that he also has Tesla on his plate and he has SpaceX as well, and Boring Company. And so he has a lot on his plate. So that mindset of the CFO and really the C-suite executives kind of the across the board is going to be very important for, as you said, looking at his vision, but also being able to enact it in the best way so that this can be a strong and profitable company over the next several decades.
I think that's going to be one of the core tasks, to also make sure that Mr. Musk stays focused on this project, given that he bought a company that is facing the effects of a slowing economy, that hasn't been as profitable in recent years as people were envisaging before. And of course, there's a lot on his plate. As you said, Tesla is a full-time job, SpaceX is a full-time job, plus Boring Co. So that new CFO will probably be competing with a lot of other items on Mr. Musk's agenda, and we'll have to make sure that Twitter gets the time and attention it needs. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
And Twitter in itself is a platform that has had its issues in trying to be profitable to begin with. So it's really thinking about new ways at this point, having been around as long as it has, Twitter, thinking about new ways that it can kind of innovate and be a stronger company moving forward.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see what comes out of these plans and ideas that Mr. Musk has uttered. For example, the sort of making people pay for their blue tick or making people pay for other services. We'll also have to see what happens to this question as to who is on Twitter and who isn't. So this policing of the platform that the company after the last presidential election sort of enforced. We've seen speculation or comments from analysts that Twitter under Mr. Musk could be cutting down on some of its enforcement and sort of, quote, policing efforts and be more open to a broader variety of political viewpoints. We've seen speculation about whether the ban on former President Trump would be taken away or not. So I think some changes could also just be coming from how Mr. Musk positions the company, and some spending that previously took place could also fall away if the company were to decide it wouldn't be as strict on going through sensitive content and other items that users post on Twitter, which it has in past quarters.
Well, and then there's also the regulatory side where, Musk has already, kind of drawn attention to himself and his actions already. But obviously the focus of Congress in and around social media platforms and big tech in general, that we expect there's going to be more brought to pass in that area from Congress over the next couple of years, and how Twitter as a platform in kind of this world of social media is going to be dealing with all of this.
Of course. And it's also interesting that this happens at a time when there is a broad discourse in the U.S. about what social media platforms should be, what kind of rules they should enforce, and the fact that going forward, Twitter is not going to be regulated by rules that are governing publicly traded companies, but is operating as a private company, adds to that concern from some lawmakers and people in this and regulators in this space, that in the end this very important tool for people to form opinions and to inform themselves is basically no longer being controlled by the strict rules that control publicly traded businesses in the U.S., but in the hands of Elon Musk. We'll see what happens and what comes out of it.
Suffice it to say, this becomes one of the more interesting hires to look at in terms of the world of being a CFO or a financial chief that you guys will be following over the next couple of years, probably.
Well, I don't think it's going to take us as long as that. I would expect some sort of appointment reasonably soon, given that the CFO in many large businesses and Twitter also will remain a large business. So this is a crucial position for Mr. Musk to fill. I'm very curious to see who it might be. We are trying to report this story out, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's somebody from within his own network, so somebody who he has a standing relationship with, and somebody who already has worked with him and knows him well, given that this is certainly a position that will require close coordination with Mr. Musk. So that would be my expectation.
Nina, pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was great.
Thank you. Nina Trentman, who is bureau chief for the CFO Journal with the Wall Street Journal.